Hi and welcome to Ride, my name's John. We're here today for our series of maintenance edits for roadcyclinguk.com. Today we're going to look at the front derailleur setup. A lot of different systems on the market, a lot of different brands on the market I should say. Principles are all the same, with the exception of the electronic stuff. All the mechanical systems work in the same way. This is a regular double chainring setup. It's a compact chain set. Refers to the number of teeth on the chain rings. Two chain rings, a small and a large. There are triple chain sets available. A little bit more, or a little bit less common nowadays with the compacts being so popular. Principle again with the triple is the same. It's a little bit more tricky to set up a triple, but maybe we'll cover that at a later date. Today we're just going to focus on the double setup. Very similar principles as to the rear derailleur. You only have really two adjustments on the derailleur itself. The third adjustment for cable tension will be somewhere else on the bike, either on the braze on the frame or sometimes on an inline barrel adjuster within the cable itself. Normally the best thing to do first of all is to set up the set stop screws. You also got adjustment in the height of the derailleur. This is what they call a band on derailleur, so it's actually a band that clamps around the seat tube. The other alternative is what they call a braze on. That will require a lug on the frame that the derailleur then screws to. That limits the amount of up and down adjustment that you could have. Principally with a band on derailleur, you could have that mounted anywhere on this tube, and obviously there's an optimal amount of distance above the chain rings that you want to have the derailleur. So first things first, let's disconnect the cable so we can see if the set stop screws are doing their job and see if the derailleur is mounted on the seat tube at the correct height. So we'll just make a shift. We'll throw the chain down onto the smallest sprocket. Again, only two tools needed. Phillips screwdriver, 5mm Allen key. We'll just disconnect the cable. Let it hang. And immediately, the first thing we're going to look at is the height of the derailleur. Now for me, this is a little bit too high. Normally a couple of millimeters above the chain ring is what you're looking for. So it needs to be lowered, and we also need to check from above. You can check from behind or from in front as well. The derailleur needs to be parallel with the chain rings. If it's pivoted or rotated around the seat tube, you'll have a heck of a job to get the chain to run without it rubbing on the derailleur. So first thing I'm going to do, just going to drop the derailleur down. So we'll just loosen the clamp. Now it's worth being wary here. If you're running a really expensive high-end carbon frame and it has a band on front derailleur, torque settings are very critical. If you over tighten that bolt, you're going to have a problem with crushing the seat tube. That's going to get expensive. If you under tighten it, you're going to have problems with it actually kind of spinning on the tube itself. So be mindful of that. Check the manufacturer's torque specifications, get a decent torque wrench, but also use some common sense. Torque wrench is obviously only as good as the person using it. So we just drop that down. You can actually see on this bike, you can see the mark in the dirt where we've moved it, so you can see how much lower it is now, a couple of mil. You can now see the distance here. It is a lot closer. It is supposed to have this gap, it does run out, so it is kind of a tapered gap. We're looking at this front end of the derailleur. Looking from above, it needs to come out a little bit. So the back end of the derailleur needs to be swung out. Just loosen that bolt a little bit more. Just move it around. It's just on sight, so get it squared up. We've got a much closer setup there now. So next thing we need to do, still ignoring the cable, is look at the set stop screws. The inside set stop screw takes care of how far in the derailleur will move. You can see if I undo that screw, you see the derailleur physically moves in or out. So that's going to govern how far in the derailleur moves, so i.e. shifting from the big chainring to the small chainring. Ideally what you want to have is no contact with the chain when you're up there. Right now you can hear when the chain's in the biggest sprocket, so the lowest gear, and on the small chainring, you can still hear that chain rubbing on the inside plate of the derailleur. We wind that screw out. You can do it as you pedal. You can hear that disappears. I'll wind it in again. You hear it? disappears. So you just want a slight gap between the chain itself and the inside chain plate. Too big a gap and you'll find that when you shift across it could throw the chain right off of the chain ring. Too small a gap and you'll get that noise. So that's that taken care of. Now we'll set the outer set stop screw in a minute when we've connected the cable back up. Otherwise you've got to try and manually move the chain up and pedal and it's all just a bit of a mess. So next thing we're going to do is we're going to reconnect the derailleur cable. 5mm Allen key, pull it through, anchor it in behind the bolt. Just pinch it up. Pull it tight with your hand to start with. There we go. We can tidy. This is obviously a cable that's been used. If we were replacing the cable, obviously it'll look a lot neater than this. We can go back and we'll tidy this up in a minute. So, I like to do my front derailleur adjustments with the derailleur at the rear set so that the chain is in the middle of the sprockets. Gives the chain a nice straight line. And we'll go in and we'll make a shift up. You can see the derailleur is shifted up quite nicely there. But what happens if you shift the derailleur at the rear to the back? You've got that noise again. So the chain is rubbing on the outside chain plate. Now that'll either be not enough cable tension. You can check that by pulling the derailleur cable. It's an external system, but on this one it has no effect. Now that tells me that the set stop screw is too far in. Not enough room for the derailleur to travel out. So the outermost set stop screw takes care of the outer shift. If we wind that out a little bit, you can see we've got some movement on the derailleur again now. Now it still rubs right now, so there's not enough tension in that cable when we make the shift to move that derailleur out and hold it there. So like I said earlier, somewhere on the system, somewhere on the bike, there's a barrel adjuster. You can see it on this side. This is the rear derailleur. The same thing is on this side of the bike. So we can introduce some cable tension into the system just by winding that barrel adjuster outwards. It's an anti-clockwise movement. And that will allow the derailleur to travel out further. So there we got it. Smallest sprocket, biggest chainring, no cable rub, no chain rub, sorry. Nice and quiet. So again, bring the derailleur on the rear back up to the middle of the sprockets. Gives a nice straight chain line, gives a true indication of how well the derailleur is functioning. And make a shift. Does it drop down to the small chainring? Yes it does. If we go up to the big sprockets at the back, is it quiet? Yes it is. Back up to the big chainring, shifts fine. Down to the big, small sprockets, no rub. Now back up to the bigger sprockets on the big chainring, we've got some noise again. Now on these systems you have like a micro adjust. So you've got some rub in there, but if you just touch this inside button a little bit, if it's set right, it gives you just enough clearance, just a tiny micro shift. Touch it again, and that'll be your downshift. So that's a system that, or a feature that Shimano in this case have worked into their setup, and it's quite often overlooked. I like to do a couple of kind of rough shifts, if you like, try to simulate real world use. We've got no overshifts going in, we've got no overshifts coming out. And that's all pretty good. Obviously we want to cap off the end there. We'll cut that and cap that later.